City Council order, please call the roll.
Bergeron.
Present.
Coos.
Here.
Harris.
Present.
Carlson. Here. Olson.
Here.
Severson.
Here.
West. Here.
Will you please stand and do the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. First business we have tonight is a public hearing on ordinance 13-17-13, increasing water rates by 5%. We close out a regular meeting and we're in public hearing. Is anybody here to speak to that tonight? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Paul Sear from E.C. Phillips & Son, and I'm here to support the support the 5% increase across the board that has been recommended by KPU staff for the water rates. Some of the proposed increases substantially increase our fixed costs, and this is problematic for us, as it would be for anyone doing business in Ketchikan now or in the future. After many years of working under this water rate structure, we have formulated our business plan accordingly. And it's hard to believe water is the issue here in Ketchikan. It actually should be an asset used to attract and keep businesses in Ketchikan. As one of the largest, if not the largest, employer of full-time and seasonal employees here in Ketchikan, it is our hope that we would be afforded ample opportunity to alter or change our business plan prior to any dramatic changes being made to municipal services. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. John?
Yep, good evening. My name's John Skoblick. I live at 3806 Fairview Avenue, and I'm an employee of Triton Seafoods, and I work at 720 Stedman. The water rate issue at hand all boils down to a few simple things to me. This is all about making a balanced budget for the KP Water Department and filling the plus or minus $140,000 gap that currently exists. The whole issue is about the cost of water infrastructure, pipes, valves, tanks, and everything else that physically allow the water to flow out to all the KPU water customers, large and small. Seafood processors have again been singled out and targeted unfairly for reasons totally beyond their control regarding potential new water rates. The staff has recommended a 5% across-the-board water rate increase to balance the budget. Who besides the staff would have more expertise in water department issues and how to solve them regarding the budget? I urge you to listen to the paid experts, the staff. All options to balance the budget other than the 5% across the board option should be dismissed and forgotten because they are not fair and equitable to all the users in our community. This issue is all about infrastructure costs and water delivery to all customers, not the amount of water available or the cost of treating the water. Every KPU water customer uses the infrastructure and is charged on a line size basis. The residential water service line in our city system, the residential water service lines in our city water system make up 85.6% of all lines. The fish processors water service lines in the city of Ketchikan system make up 0.2, less than 1% of all the lines. Why should the smallest user of water service line infrastructure even be considered to balance the budget for the entire community? Fish processors have been unfairly targeted because their usage rate. Every customer is charged by the service line size, not by metered rate. That system was designed by the city. Yes, the fish processors use a lot of water, and that is an understatement. But again, consumption is not the issue. The fish processors have met with the city and will continue to meet with the city to address the other issues regarding consumption and how they may better structure the water rates. Fish processors all sit next to a copious supply of seawater that could be treated and used in their facilities. If they are pushed To do that, their consumption rate of public city water would be greatly reduced and would create another budget issue that nobody at this table can measure tonight. Local fish processors pay a raw fish tax for every pound of fish that they process. Ketchikan is the salmon capital of the world, and there are hundreds of thousands, and possibly sometimes millions of dollars that can come to the city via the fish processors. Is that not a large monetary contribution to the city? I strongly support the staff recommendation of a 5% across-the-board increase to water rates to balance the water budget. It is fair and equitable, and that is what the experts have advised you to do. We measure the rain here by the foot in Ketchikan. It's not about the amount of the water. It's about the pipes that everybody in this city uses. Fish processors are one of the few remaining economic engines in our community, and they shouldn't be the only minority group targeted to make up budget shortfalls for water infrastructure. I thank you very much for your time and attention regarding this very serious city issue, and have copies of my presentation. You can pass them out if you'd like. I also emailed every council member and the mayor a copy of this as well.
Does anybody have any questions for John? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else want to speak to the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We're back in regular session. That brings us down to communications. We have something from the Forest Service 5-year review, comment period extension. And then that brings us to persons to be heard. Doug, you want to start us off?
My name's Doug Andrew. I'm here representing Annabelle's Restaurant and Fish Pirate Restaurant. What I'm here to talk about is the liquor licenses that have been come up before the boards. This is a very serious issue. You guys have given 2 or 3 away for free, and there's, from what I understand, somewhere between 2 and 6 more people coming down the pike on this thing. So I just want to talk a little bit about how many of these things are you guys going to hand out? Problem is people have paid for these in good conscience and pay a lot of money. I have a guy that I know just paid $60,000 for his liquor license, and one of the guys that are going to be asking for a free one are going to be coming down and within the next few weeks, and he's within 100 feet of 2 other liquor licenses that have been bought and paid for, and he's going to be asking for a free one. So I just don't understand where it comes off, where we're giving these liquor licenses away. They're supposed to be like limited entry, and now all of a sudden they're just like proliferating. And so anybody that owns a regular license with alcohol and beer and wine, it's worth about $125,000. The beer and wine license that just got purchased, or what's going to be within 100 foot of this one that's going to be asked for free, he just purchased it for $60,000. Now you guys gave one to the pizza fella, who's a very nice guy and has a very nice product, but he's got 3 other pizza places he's competing against that all put money out for these things. This area is already, as far as the ABC board, is already saturated as far as the number of licenses that are supposed to be put out. So what's going to come down to is the problem now is you guys have given these licenses away, so now the next guy is going to be expecting one. So if you deny him, then he's going to have a beef, and all of us that paid for ours has a beef if you give them away and saturate the market. So I guess my end point would be is, who's going to pay the financial harm to the people that have paid for these licenses when you guys are getting them out for nothing? So that's all I have to say.
Any questions for Doug? Doug, I have a couple questions, so it's good.
Doug, are there any licenses, beer and license, or the full thing available for purchase right now?
I'm not sure if I know the truth. But the point is it's limited entry. It's just like if the guy wanted to go seining, and there wasn't any seine, you can get, if you offer enough money, somebody will sell you the license. So, right.
Thanks, Doug. That brings us to Kay Andrews.
Good evening. My name is Kay Andrew. I live at 506 Tower Road, Ketchikan, Alaska. I'm a lifelong resident of Ketchikan, and I'd like to also speak to you. I am representing Annabelle's Famous Cake and Chowder House and the Fish Pirates Saloon. I spoke to you guys a couple years ago when this very issue came up, and I would like to pretty much say the same thing that Doug has reiterated. We paid for our licenses. We paid a large amount of money. We have been in this business. Once we were in it for 11 years in the Arctic Bar, and now this will be our 11th season at Annabelle. We've worked very hard, as everybody does in business. You have to or you don't make it. And I just have a real problem with giving these licenses out for anything. So I had a couple of questions. I have a book. I'm sure you guys are all aware of it. It's the alcohol beverage book. And went through a few of the questions in here. So my question is how many free licenses are we allowed to give out in the community, the city of Ketchikan, because it's a city-borough thing? I'd like to know how many we're supposed to be allowed to give out and how many we actually have on the market right now. The other question is, one of the things in the book talks about that to get a license, you can have no more than one alcohol beverage restaurant place for every 1,500 people in population. So what is the population of the city of Ketchikan? Are we saturated? Now the ABC board says we are. They leave it up to the control of the governing body to decide really whether they can allow any more licenses in the community or not. I tried to get a hold of them to find out what this was, but no one answered my call today. So I would just like to say that I'm very much against giving these licenses out. To my knowledge, there is a couple for sale. If there isn't, then you go find one, because they are out there. Bring me enough money, I'll sell you mine. Maybe I'll sell mine and come and apply for a free one. They're that easy to get. So that's all I have. Thank you.
We'll get you some answers.
Thanks.
All right, that brings us down to Jason Custer.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jason Custer, and I reside at 1260 Millar Street. I work for the City of Saxman as Saxman's Development Coordinator, and I also work as the Chairman and Spokesperson of the Mahoney Lake Hydro Partnership, which is a public-private partnership comprised of the City of Saxman, Cape Fox Corporation, and Alaska Power and Telecom. The Mahoney Lake Partnership encourages the City of Ketchikan to move forwards in analyzing the future individual sale of SEPA projects and fully concurs with all recommendations presented by City Manager Amelon. The Southeast Alaska Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP, commissioned by the Alaska State Legislature, characterizes SEPA as an, quote, inflexible utility business structure, end quote, on page 3-3. Stating as follows: a joint action agency, SEPA, operates as a non-jurisdictional generation and transmission entity servicing southern Southeast Alaska. SEPA, by contract, is obligated and required to provide its services only to the three communities of Petersburg, Wrangell, and Ketchikan. This system has no open access rules which would allow for interconnections with other utility systems. Under the terms of power sales agreements, the SEPA system is not economically dispatched. Construction of new state-funded capital projects may require these structures to be changed so that the benefits from state funds could be equally distributed. Please allow me to read from a letter I submitted on January 9th of this year to Ketchikan's elected officials, probably all of you, which describes a possible alternative arrangement. As Southeast Alaska's energy needs become more pressing, I hear a growing number of community and business leaders speak to the frustrating challenge of developing new energy resources vis-a-vis SEPA's existing power sales agreements. This community frustration with SEPA has been exacerbated by SEPA's recent decision to cancel operating agreements with KPU and the Thomas Bay Power Authority for the Swan Lake and Tyee Lake projects and consolidate operations with a single, as yet undetermined operator at the expense of existing local jobs. One solution to these problems would be to divest generation resources currently owned by SEPA back to local communities which already have first rights to energy and capacity. SEPA would change into a regional transmission organization, or RTO, which would maintain and operate the current and future transmission system for any public or private organizations that wishes to utilize these assets for a reasonable fee. This type of reorganization would provide access to transmission on a transparent basis under tariffed rules. All communities would pay the same. Municipalities would no longer be tasked with the challenge of collaboratively running SEPA and instead could focus on addressing their community's individual needs. This arrangement would make consumers, Southeast Alaska's utilities, responsible for providing for their own needs in the manner they feel is best. Communities would be free to operate their own power generation sources, construct new energy projects, purchase power from other communities over SEPA's transmission lines, or operate diesel generators. Another important thought, that's the end of my letter from January. Here's another thought. Swan Lake will be relicensing in 2030, and Tyee will be relicensing in 2034. There will be a significant risk to SEPA and its member communities during the relicense process. There have been situations in other locations in the U.S. where an intervener in the relicense tries to gain rights to energy output, particularly if the initial investment was publicly funded via state or federal sources. Here's yet another reason that Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Petersburg should collaborate to obtain direct ownership of Tyee and Swan as soon as possible before they are forced to share the wealth and benefit with others who paid for the projects indirectly but have not yet received benefit. As you evaluate the function which you believe SEPA should be fulfilling for our region, please bear in mind SEPA's comments on the Southeast Alaska Integrated Resource Plan, available on the Alaska Energy Authority's website. And I have a link to the source for anybody who wants to check that out. SEPA's comments decry the SIRUP planning process for lack of appropriate stakeholder involvement, stating as follows. Public stakeholder involvement was very limited. An IRP should be a transparent and participatory planning process. It contrasts with traditional planning that is typically top-down, with public consultation occurring only as a last step when plans are virtually complete. A successful integrated resource plan process starts at the bottom and works its way up. If you want the public and ratepayers to be part of this solution, they need to be aware of the problems so the needs and ideas of all parties with a stake in the future of energy resources are considered. And so those were SEPA's comments on the IRP. In closing, the Mahoney Partnership supports a Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Petersburg-led initiative to conduct bottom-up evaluation of divestment of SEPA's resources and hope that this approach may lead to conditions which facilitate addition of greatly needed generation resources such as Mahoney Lake. Thank you for your time and the hard work that you all do, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Jason? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next, Trey.
Honorable Mayor and council members, good to be back again. Just wanted to touch on a few points. Today there have been a few inconsistencies out in with recent public testimony. It was stated that SEPA was created for the sole purpose of developing the Swan-Tyee intertie. This is simply not true. In fact, the Third Amendment of the restated Joint Action Agency Agreement, often referred to as the JAA, relating to the Southeast Alaska Power Agency, mutually agreed upon and signed by the cities of Ketchikan, Petersburg, and Wrangell states. In Section 5 and then several subsections D, E, P, and R with in regard to the powers of the agency. The agency has the power subject to the limitations and requirements of the agreement and applicable law, rules, and regulations. 2, and I'll just cite E, design, develop, construct, own, manage, maintain, improve, expand, operate additional generating and transmission facilities. So I just wanted to, that's more of a public clarification so people don't have the misconception that SEPA's was just structured for the Swan Tyee. So in short, the JA clearly contemplates and provides a comprehensive framework defining SEPA's role far beyond the Swan Tyee intertie. SEPA's role is also acutely defined in our mission statement, which I believe was brought before and supported by this council on March 21st. For the benefit of those not present at that time, SEPA's mission is to provide the lowest wholesale power rate consistent with sound utility planning and business practices. We exist for the long-term benefit of our member utilities and the ratepayers, providing unified regional leadership for project development and prudent management of our interconnected power system. I think it's important to note that SEPA's wholesale power rate has been 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour for over 15 years. And this translates into a retail rate that is one of the lowest and most stable in the entire state of Alaska. Our member utilities have also enjoyed periodic rebate payments as determined by our board of directors, which is comprised of representatives from the 3 communities. As a final thought for your consideration, there are only about 12,000 meters total between the interconnected communities of Ketchikan, Petersburg, and Wrangell to spread the costs. Development of additional power resources for our children and future generations will be very expensive, and a unified approach will prosper over isolationism. SEPA is here for your benefit and provides a strong regional presence that can be leveraged to better serve the best long-term interests of the ratepayers. I'd be happy to come back at a later time and discuss the details of the benefits SEPA provides to Ketchikan and our other member communities. I think it's important that people understand those benefits that they're getting from SEPA and the services we provide. The 6.8 cents that we charge for power, there's a lot of things that are bundled into that payment. So I won't take up any more of your time tonight, but thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Anybody have any questions for Trey? Thank you.
Your Honor?
Oh, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, Trey, earlier on, Mr. Custer spoke about the Mahoney project and the ability to sell power into the grid or Ketchikan. Could you explain a little bit about the pending RFO?
Certainly. SEPA has undertaken a recent effort to put together what we call a request for offers of power and energy, also referred to as an RFO. Similar to an RFP, which you guys deal with all the time. It's basically an open invitation for power providers to come in and propose to selling into our system. So what was told to you earlier by Mr. Custer is not exactly factual. There are mechanisms and there's opportunities for people to come sell into our system. One thing you have to remember, the bonding for Swan and Tyee projects is the security for that is part of the reason why we have the power sales agreement. And I think that's very important for people to understand. So if a new project comes along, say it's going to cost $100 million to build a hydro project, you're going to have to go bond for that. And that bond is going to also have to be secured by a power sales agreement of some sort. So I hope I answered your question there, Mr. Severson.
Yes, thank you, Trey. The other question I had, if it's okay, Your Honor, is the power sales agreement. That was developed by the cooperation of the three communities. That wasn't developed by SEPA prior to its existence, was it?
Not to my knowledge. That is signed by the three-member utilities. They agreed to that, and it's important to remember that that has provided a very stable power rate for the community here for economic development. It was spoken about earlier tonight, where these type of utilities are critical for economic development in your area. One thing that the power sales agreement has done for you is really stabilize that for over 15 years for you.
Anything else, Bob?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.
That's everybody on the list. Is there anybody else here who'd like to address the council tonight? Come on up, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. I appreciate the time that you put in your efforts that you volunteer on a weekly basis to try to make the community a better place to live. My name is Andy Rowolf, and I came to Ketchikan in the 60s, and like a lot of people, didn't have a whole lot of money. I was pretty broke when I got here, but I worked hard, and there was a tremendous amount of opportunity here at the time, and I'd like to see that it's that way for the younger generation that's coming along. I'd like to speak a little bit about this SEPA arrangement myself. In the 70s, I was a journeyman carpenter, 70s and 80s for Ketchikan Local, and was one of the first persons that was dispatched on the Swan Lake Dam project to set up the camp, and then to later on go on with the dam building construction. And I was one of two people who were left on that job to finish the project at the end, to do the punch list and make sure that it was ready to turn over to the Ketchikan Public Utilities. My brother was the first person out on Swan Lake to take over as operations and maintenance foreman for the Swan Lake project, and was in that position for 12 years and lived out there, worked on it, and ate, lived, and breathed that project, loved it, and had numerous written comments on the way that he ran that plant. During the duration of that construction project, I had the opportunity to become friends with three R.W. Beck engineers who had developed and designed that dam, and learned a whole lot about that and a whole lot about some of the other feasibility studies that they had done for power generation in this area. I would like to offer my input on some of these ideas. I was kind of disillusioned when it came out in the paper by the SEPA CEO that if anybody had any better ideas, bring them on. I mean, that sounded like some kind of a challenge, or somebody wanted to pick a fight. Well, I didn't want to pick a fight, so I didn't want to get involved. So I do have better ideas, I think, than compromising the structural integrity of Swan Lake Dam at an expense of a couple of $100 million if we lost that dam by raising it 16 feet. And I can tell you that I don't care what engineer you're going to talk to that might say that that's going to work. You're going to compromise that dam if you try to raise that dam 16 feet. For one thing, a lot of you probably don't even know this, but there isn't a stick of rebar in that dam, with the exception of the spillway. That dam, another thing you probably don't know, is a lot of you don't know, is that from summertime to wintertime it moves 6 inches from expansion and contraction. It's also the largest, or it was at the time, the largest triple curvature dam on the planet, and it's designed on the principle of an eggshell. The harder that something is pushed against that design, the tighter it locks itself into the mountain. The dam is curves around the canyon, it curves up the face, and it's also tapers from the bottom to the top. At the top, it's 6 feet thick. Adding 16 feet to the top of that dam is a huge risk, and I don't think this community can afford to build a new dam or risk the lives of powerhouse operators at the bottom of it if it gave out. R.W. Beck told me at the time that the dam could sustain a pretty good earthquake if it was centered in Dixon Entrance, but they weren't sure if it could take a direct hit by an earthquake. So how much is it going to be able to hold if a Dixon Entrance quake took place and there's another 16 feet of lake pushing behind it? So these are things that you need to consider, but there are other alternatives, and R.W. Beck did explore some of those things, and I'd like to go into them. I don't know if I have time to do that here, but I am concerned a little bit about this SEPA contract we have, because we no longer have control of Swan Lake Dam from the Bailey Powerhouse. We have to go through Wrangell in order to turn on or shut down a generator or whatever. A lot of this is being run from a laptop that somebody has in Idaho, from what I understand. Another thing that I don't understand is why nobody can get a City of Wrangell. One of their beefs is that you can't look into the finances of SEPA. We don't know where their money's going. But all of those things aside, I just think that there needs to be a lot better opportunity for public to give their input without being faced with some sort of a challenge right off the bat, like bring it on. I didn't appreciate that comment, and I'm not too thrilled with SEPA's management.
If you have ideas, make sure you get them to us. Another thing, finances, they are readily available. I review those all the time. I can get you some. Dick?
Yeah, Andy, I was just going to make a similar comment. Anytime you've got a question, the CEO of SEPA will talk to you. And if you got good ideas, he'll talk to you. The finances are totally open to anybody. And Mr. Severs and I and Mr. Bergeron both sit on that board. We know when we can go get those things. And there's no secrets, but go talk. You've got some good ideas about and concerns about the raising it. And go talk to the CEO, because he will talk to you, and those guys will listen. Don't worry about what appeared to be a challenge.
And one other thing that I wanted to bring up was that previous management here in Ketchikan spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to study the weather, and about the only thing they found out from those studies was that the weather they can't predict the weather. And the only thing that's changed since that study is the price of diesel fuel has gone up. So we need to find we need to develop more sources of hydropower. We're running out, and we're going to be in a world of hurt if we have to keep running these diesels all the time. When that dam, when the Tyee project went into effect, we were all told that this was going to be the end of the diesels. But we were really oversold on that Intertie project. But it can be utilized, and it can be utilized efficiently, but we need to get our politicians involved in a couple of directions, which I'd like to discuss.
Thank you, Andy.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Andy and I talked before about the Swan Lake project, and I appreciate all the information he has, and I've asked him to we get in contact with the engineers. But Andy, I think that the actual raise on the dam is only going to be about a 5 or 6 foot pony wall, from what I understand, on the top. But I think that our engineer is looking forward to meeting with you and talking to you about construction. Get a lot of the history that you have. There's probably very few people around that have that anymore, so I appreciate you stepping forward.
Yeah, I'm one of the last ones left. A lot of them are already gone bye-bye, so get me while you can. I might be the next one.
Thank you, Andy. Stick around a while. Anybody else want to address the council tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda. The only ones I saw to add, I was hoping, would be 6A1, Uniform Code Abatement of Dangerous Buildings, which we did last week, 7A1 and 7A4. Those are the only 3 I had, unless somebody else had something else. Any objections to those?
You said 6A1?
Yes.
Unfinished business?
Yeah, that ordinance on the buildings.
Oh, okay.
And then-
I think we could probably add 7A2 also. Change order on
If nobody has any objection.
None here, Your Honor.
Okay, so we have 4 items that we're going to put on the consent agenda, 6A1, 7A1, 7A2, and 7-4.
What about 7A5, the one for the cemetery? People want to discuss that?
I had a question or two. 'Cause
Okay.
that was it. All right, we'll put those on there. Do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
I'd move to consent.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, can you read the items?
Approval of minutes, regular meeting of March 21st, 2013. Application for restaurant designation permit, Best Western Landing and Jeremiah's. Amendment number 1, lease between the City of Ketchikan and the United States Department of Agricultural Forest Service, Southeast Alaska Discovery Center parking lot. Budget transfer, equipping and outfitting of police department vehicles. Contract number 1234, change order number 4, Jackson Street Area Reconstruction Project, S&S General Contractors and Equipment Rentals, Inc. Substituting source of funding, contract number 1238A, City Hall Exterior and Interior Renovations, Dawson Construction, Inc. Exempting telecommunications, billing software, and maintenance support from competitive bid written quotation requirements, ComSoft. Ordinance number 131722, amending the Ketchikan Municipal Code entitled Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings by adding new subsections relating to the imposition and recovery of the cost of repair and demolition of dangerous buildings, second reading. Contract number 1220A, contract number 1, final, or change order number 1, final with the Bodden Street Apartments abatement and demolition with BAM. Contract number 1234, change order number 5, Jackson Street Area Reconstruction with S&S Contractors. And a budget transfer for the purchase of a Bobcat 5600 Tool Cat utility work machine with Craig Taylor Equipment Company.
All right. Anybody have any questions so we can do the roll? Call the roll.
Harris?
Aye.
Coos? Excuse me. Severson?
Yes.
West?
Yes.
Carlson? Olson?
Yes.
And Bergeron.
Okay, that passes unanimously. That brings us down to 6B1, ordinance 131713, increasing water rates by 5%, second reading. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I move the City Council approve in second reading ordinance number 131713, increasing water rates by 5%, providing for a date for the public hearing and establishing an effective date.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Dick?
Yeah, Your Honor, I still have some concerns about how these rates are distributed, because in the water rate study, it shows a lot of discrepancies, but I really don't have a good solution or suggestion as to what they are. And Mr. Scoblic brought up an idea there about, the number of lines and so forth, and maybe at this point in time we just need to use a straight 5%, but if we do, I think we need to bring back some information to the council concerning the individual cost of the structure. I mean, what it costs of the delivery system and the cost of the water going through it, because they're two different things. And he made it clear. I may not agree with what it will come out to, but our cost of water is going to go up, especially if we start treating it more than we are. And we're putting a lot of water through the system. And to me, it's like putting gas in your car. You got your car you take care of, you got the gas you take care of. And maybe before we adjust the rates, and like I say, I still think we need to adjust them because some users are paying less than they should, some pay more. We need some more information about it. And everybody, I think, had those, if they can recall, and I did not recall. I apologize to Bob for jumping because I was working off of the first set of numbers, but residential folks, according to our study, on cost of service should go up 6% total, whereas it looks like multifamily and small commercial are paying quite a bit more than they should, and large commercial are probably in the ballpark of down about 5%, but yet the fish processors are still underpaying according to this study, and we need to figure out how to make this equitable, and I don't know what it is. I don't have a better solution unless somebody does.
Carl, I have a question before Sam.
Go ahead.
I have that memo to you from Bob about the implementation of a meter-based system for the water division, and it goes down to the end where we talk about meter for all large commercial fish and customers and fish processing use a flat rate structure for small commercial, and then I believe it's a flat rate for residential. How close are we to moving on this? Because I mean, there's, you know, the line size, you know, we're going on now, and now we talk about using usage. And if we go to that kind of system, then we got to come up with some kind of meter rate. And I know you guys want to continue meeting with the processors. What's the timeline? I mean, that's what I'm interested in, and like to get into kind of some kind of ordinance form and done. What are we looking at?
Mr. Newell and Mr. Kleinecker are working on that issue now. My understanding was that the council wanted to keep that discussion separate from this particular rate increase. Bob, I don't know what your timing is. If you could address that.
I can't give you a definitive time right now. What we are in the process of doing is going back and looking at the FCF study, and to make sure that the rate structure that they're proposing, using meters for larger commercial customers and a flat rate structure for small customers, to make sure that the revenue streams are there. We're not sure if they are. We have done some work already, and what we're finding out is there could be a possible revenue shortfall. So we need to make sure that if we go with this structure, that we're going to generate the revenues we need to cover the cost of operations. And that's going to take some time to
What would be basing the residential rates at what they are now and looking at?
Well, the residential rate wouldn't change all that much. They would pretty much stay where they are. There might be a slight increase, but the biggest impact will be on to the commercial customers, both the small and the large commercial customers and the processors.
And then when you come back, you'd have a metered rate schedule for us?
Well, it depends on what the council wants to do. I mean, you could also implement a flat rate structure for large customers. It just depends on which way you want to go.
Okay. Well, I guess not everybody's seen this, so I guess I'm picking up what I was interested in. Because it is, I mean, we've been talking about I'm changing it to usage instead of line size, so I was just hoping that was farther along, because then I'd say let's just don't even do a raise and wait till we come up with this new system. But if it's going to be months, next year?
Well, it won't be next year. We just need some more time to put it together and to make sure that, like I said, that we're going to have the revenues there to pay the bill. That's what it boils down to.
Sam?
I have a couple of questions for the manager. Carl, is there, I'll just start with the rate structure. Is there any rate structures that you know of that are derived from the percentage of service lines, and you're, like if I own 0.2% of the service lines, that I pay 0.2% of the water that's used?
Most of the rate structures I'm familiar with, Councilmember Bergeron, are based on a metered water system.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, when we had the consultant come up and we were talking about the inequities in our rate structure, I think the thing that I took home, and I would just wanted you to confirm if my memory is correct or not, is that the fairest way to sell water is to meter for it, and you pay for what you use. Is that what our consultant said?
That's what our consultant said, and it's important to recognize that when we develop that rate, it's based on exactly what Councilmember Coos said. You've got two components. You've got the cost of your treatment, and you got the cost of your distribution system, and both have to be accounted for. The cost to produce the water is going up just as much as you're incurring debt service to fix the cost of your distribution system. So the rates have got to be based on those two components.
Right, and so, and really and truly, the only pragmatic way to do that is to incorporate all of those costs to all of the users, regardless of how many percentages, whatever pipe you have or what size. But the fairest way is to bill for what you actually use.
Long term, but that is going to require a significant investment to meter,
That's true, but we also, if I remember correctly, and that's why I'm asking to bring this up and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we were fairly accurately able to extrapolate in general what the residential users used versus what the commercial users were, because some folks were metered. We backed off what we had of the metered folks, and then we also checked our meter on what we produced, and we were able to extrapolate what went to the residential ratepayers, divided that up, and came up with an estimate on what was equitable per the average use. Was that correct?
I would agree with that.
So, again, and so we go back, and my point is that I think that we are able to fairly accurately define and defend who is using the water, and especially the folks that have the commercial things that have the meters on it. And the point that I'm making is that I think it's pretty obvious that the residential ratepayers have been subsidizing the commercial ratepayers because they're paying more per than the commercial guys are. Going forward, and we had this discussion the last time, is that, by golly, we're going to do something about it next time. Well, it's next time. And so I just wanted to let my other fellow council members know that I'm not inclined to have that trend continue. And I think that we can defend who's using what. We know what the cost of producing this stuff is. We all absorb rising costs of gasoline, of oil, of groceries, of things that go up that are out of our control, and we live with it. But I think we are here to fairly and equitably charge for the services that we deliver. And so I think going forward, if we know that there is an inequity, I think that we have an obligation to address it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I agree with what Sam is saying in principle, but I also hear what the fish processors are saying in concerning, we're going from one system. I think it would be difficult to all of a sudden change the game plan and say, okay, we've been charging you this much for this long, but next year, tomorrow, we're going to change it and increase it by, however much to make it equitable. I think that something like that would have to be done incrementally. I think anyone would need a chance to kind of reconfigure business plans and processes and whatnot. Maybe there's ways to conserve water usage that they hadn't implemented before, but now they can look into things. You're talking about a pretty large change in how you're going to be billing one sector of our community, and I just think that it should be done in a fair and equitable manner and not just overnight kind of thing. I would go into shock if I were going to get a bill like that increased, without some ample time to make some adjustments in my budget and my business plan and my future. So.
Yeah, Dick, then Sam.
Yeah, again, I guess the reason why I stuck with the 5% now is if we were to do what I think we should do, which is raise some of these rates, and some of them at some point in time probably a fair amount, it's not fair to hit them right now. If they're beginning of the season, they haven't budgeted for it, they don't know what's going on. So to me, we live with what we've got here, and we have to have a target of by fall having a solution to these rates so that the people can plan for next year's budget. And it gives them a chance to plan for it. But I agree with Sam and Deanne that it's not easy, and we've got to tweak something. But to dumping on them without being able to budget for it and so forth is not the fair way to do it. But hitting somebody hard and we should, not a fair way to do it either. But we do it.
Sam?
A couple of points. This water rate is going to bring an additional, how many dollars, Mr. Manager? $140,000.
Annualized basis, about $140,000.
$140,000, which is not going to, we have an approximate $400,000 deficit in our water division. So we're not talking about making our water division whole on this singular rate increase. I have great empathy for the business plans and then the challenges of being self-employed, having been self-employed most of my entire life. If we talk about raising rates again, it's a matter of fairness and equity. I know I talk about my day job a lot, and I get to go around the community firsthand and see the ability of some folks to pay these rate increases and some of the choices that they have to make when we start to take more money out of their budgets, when they're taking away food, medicine, healthcare to pay a water bill, or if we're talking about making our electrical rates higher. I mean, I only wish you guys could job shadow me for a while and to get a real appreciation for what I get to see all the time. And so I want you to keep that one in mind. I mean, you can't, I mean, these people aren't talking about tax deduction. They're talking about life choices. These are people with children. These are people that are poor. They're moderately income. They're retired. Let's not forget those people.
Your Honor?
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, this is probably directed towards Carl or Bob, but, you know, you go back to that study, and without addressing the inequities, I see in there where there's a continued trend to raise rates over the next 5 to 10 years up to where we may be as much as 65% increase between now and that end game. If you know, this 5% we're going to do now, do you see us coming back? I noticed that in the Senate budget we didn't get any money for the Schoenbar project, so if we're going to continue to try to do capital projects, we don't have the money to do them.
I would concur with that, Councilmember Sievertson. I think what I'd like to try to do is take the concept that the mayor raised earlier in his remarks, talk to the finance director, bring the council back something, the understanding that while there may be a disproportionate assessment against the larger commercial and industrial users, it's something that is going to have to be phased in over a number of years, that it's not something that can be implemented all at once. I clearly understand that.
All right. Anybody else? Matt, bring us home.
We have a lot of resources here, but a lot of resources are really out of our control, and water is one of those that we do control. And I would hate to see us significantly impact the business plans and the operations of the processors to the point where they become just freezing plants and shipping everything out, and all the other year-round jobs and the other things that they do perform in terms of secondary processing, have all that get shipped out of state. I think we need to keep that in consideration. I'm fully aware that my water bill is going to go up. I'm not happy about it, but I don't want to see us drive businesses to say it's cheaper to do business down in Washington where it's closer and we can get cheaper labor.
I agree with you. And the processors, we got to keep them in that dialogue the whole time. So, all right, call the roll.
West?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Bergeron?
No.
Harris?
Okay.
Sievertson?
Yes.
Coos?
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-1. That brings us down to new business 7A3, budget transfer, enrollment and participation in Horton Health Initiative Wellness Program.
Can I sign up for this?
John?
Go ahead.
I move the City Council approve enrollment and participation in the Horton Health Initiative Wellness Program, option number 2. Employee and spouse authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $60,000 from the appropriated reserves of the general fund to the Human Resources Division's 2013 Technical Services account 63512, and direct the city manager to implement the program on behalf of the City Council.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Marty?
The medical center, we have a similar program, and it's been helpful to the employees. I think this could be a real good thing for the city employees. It promotes getting in better health and keeping in better health as a method of controlling healthcare costs down the road.
Deanne?
In my office, we do a quarterly newsletter to all of our group health clients, and it's ironic that this quarter, was dedicated to health and wellness platforms and employer-sponsored settings like this. My one concern when I read through some of the description was it centered really on exercise and movement and diet and whatnot. And I think there's a component, especially in a southeastern town with the weather and darkness and whatnot, of mental health as well. That plays a factor in a lot of the different insurance claims that people incur. I think it's a good place to start. but I would want, human resources and management and stuff to maybe keep in mind that there are some broader spectrums to a health and wellness platform than just movement and diet alone. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how the outcome of this is, because I've been trying to talk some of my groups into doing something similar, but it's very, very hard to measure the tangible results. You may start this year, but it could be years before you actually see some real results in terms of lower claim costs and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out, with the caveat to remember that there are a variety of other spectrums to wellness besides just moving and monitoring your food intake and that type of thing. But it's a good place to start.
Can I say something first?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I hate to be negative, but we're asking for $60,000 here. Is that an annual thing, Carl?
That would be,
Pretty close?
yeah.
I'd just hate to add another program at this point in time, and I know it's all wonderful, it's a wonderful thing and everything, but we're committing $60,000 annually. That's, I just wanted to, a note to the council. Marty, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to follow up on what Deanne said. I think she makes a really good point about the mental health aspects of it, too. But even if this only addressed, like, diabetes, we're seeing adult onset diabetes in children. And diabetes alone has got the potential of overwhelming our healthcare system entirely. And so I really think that our organizations and the ones that we belong to and others really need to start doing something proactively to try to stem the tide.
Okay, Dick, Sam, and Deanne.
Okay, two questions. One, this was talked about, total employees, 300 employees, is that correct? That include KPU and?
That's correct.
So why should not a proportion come out of KPU rather than general fund?
It will through the requisite transfers that we do. It's just the way it works. HR is funded through KPU on an annual basis. Bob, you want to?
Well, anyway, the illusion is it's all coming out general.
It looks that way, I understand, but the intent is for KPU to pay.
You remember those interdepartmental charges?
Yeah, I do.
We'll charge it back to KPU.
Okay, then.
And the other revenue generating fund for the city, like the harbor port, solid waste and wastewater.
Okay, I guess the other question then is, at what point in time do we do a measurement to see whether we're accomplishing anything at all? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? How long we got to go on to it before we presumably see a measurement of success?
I don't have a definitive answer to that, Councilmember Coos. I can tell you that for the past several years, we've been seeing double-digit increases in health insurance. I can just speak to my own. I know the amount of money that our insurance company paid out on me last fall. Those are the kinds of things we hope to address as we encourage employees to lead a healthier and better lifestyle. Dave, do you want to add on to that?
Well, as with any program that you take on, I do agree. Measurement of how you're doing is absolutely important. And one of the first things that we would use as far as a measuring tool is a level of participation, because we will be able to track. Not, there are certain things that we'll get on either a departmental level. We'll get very limited information as far as on a personal. But as far as in numbers of people that are actually participating in the program, that are actually getting out, doing something, it's going to be in whether or not they are achieving the various levels. If the people aren't doing it, if they don't have the initiative to do it, if they're not achieving the levels, then the program doesn't work. But conversely, if they do, if people are out moving more, if diet and habits are changing, then that's going to be, you're going to see that in the people that are reaching the levels. It's as simple as that. Whether we see a reduction in premium increases a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, that all remains to be seen given the pool that we're in. But if our contribution is able to help lower the experience factor of experience rates of the pool as a whole, then it would stand to reason that there would be some benefit to that.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Sam.
Has there been, has this kind of thing, this program come up and there's been demonstrably lower rates because of the benefits to which you just referenced?
I might defer to Bob on that because you had the discussions with Nancy Tichy. I don't have that locally. I have nothing to speak to on that. When you look at the Horton Health Initiatives, is the division, if you will, of the group that administers this program for those participants of groups of 5,000 employees or less. Virgin Health Miles is the parent group. They'll do the ones of 10,000 or more. Virgin Miles has demonstrated that in the bigger corporations, in corporations such as IBM, for one of those. They're seeing, but here again, they've been in the program several years. I mean, it's new to us, but it's been out and available for quite some time.
So several years, that's a $180,000 investment.
If it's continued on.
You feel like how many, Your Honor?
Keep going.
Well, I think that I think all of these things are a great idea. You know, in our last thing, we voted to spend more money, and here we're voting to spend more money again. I think health and wellness is a personal decision, and mental health is a personal decision. And I think it's up to the individual to do that. Myself, I have a year-round thing to the rec center, which I don't use that often, but I still have it. So it's kind of like this thing. I've got it, but I don't use it. But I'm paying for it. But, that's my decision as an individual. And I think that, I don't think that we're going to see the kind of returns that you're talking about here. I think we've got to watch every penny that we've got, and I'm not going to support it. Thanks.
Deanne?
Sam brings up some really valid points, and it's a gamble. I mean, it's one of those things where you pay now, and you implement these provisions, and you hope the outcome is what you want it to be, or you don't pay, and you have one heart attack, one medevac, and you're into a couple $100,000 claim right there. So you can spend $60,000 this year and $60,000 next year and maybe prevent a heart attack or prevent a diabetic coma or something like that. It's a gamble. Which one do you want to gamble on? Personally, I'd rather gamble on the employees being healthier and being more productive and stable than whether we're going to have a heart attack or a other complication in the group. But with that said, a comment that he made as well is that you're in a pool and you don't have any control over the rest of the pool. So your demographics may do really, really well, and that's good for your absenteeism, production, all those things that keep employees at their desk. But whether you're really going to see the rate impact that you're hoping for, it's a gamble, because the rest of the pool could be the unhealthiest group of people in the whole state of Alaska. So.
And I don't disagree, but one thing that I would add, just to shirt tail onto what you were saying, prevention. If in the context of one heart attack, one medevac, whatever it may be, if the program is successful to the point where it gets people thinking about their own health, they may be in the position to be more in contact with their healthcare provider, get an earlier diagnosis of whatever it may be, and be able to take the steps necessary to change it so that it doesn't become a big bill later.
With some of the groups that I work with, they had a person come on site and do a mini biometrics kind of testing. They actually sent some individuals directly to the hospital after doing their little mini exam. I mean, it was that critical, and the people had no idea that they were in that physical condition. But it's really a gamble.
Absolutely.
But you have to start somewhere too, and where do you begin that effort?
Individually.
Hold on.
How's that working for the health base?
I hear all you guys is talking. I mean, I just hate to add another program. I know it's probably a great program. I don't want to see I agree with Sam, personal responsibility. We voted for a rec center. If people really want to get healthy, they can go do all kinds of stuff at a rec center, and I don't know how many health outfits are around. I don't think it's our job I want them to all be healthy, but I'm not going to, I don't want to fund it. And there's other things I'd like to fund before that. So Anybody else before we call a roll? Bob, do you have anything?
Yes, Your Honor. Being that Terry works for the finance department and I'm her husband, I may have a direct benefit if this were to pass. Am I allowed to vote on this or not?
We'll let you.
All right.
Unless
Well,
Mitch comes running up.
Your Honor, I tend to agree with you and Sam on this one. I think it's a great program. If we were in better financial shape and we didn't have as many things looking at us as we do, I'd probably say that this is fair money that would be useful at the time, but at this particular point in time, I think we have better uses for it.
Anybody else before we call the roll? Matt?
I'll just go on record, I'm in the same boat as Bob.
Thank you. All right, call the roll.
Severson,
No.
Bergeron,
No.
Coos,
Yes.
Harris,
No.
Olson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Okay, passes 4-3. I lost my position, hold on.
Where are we?
I'm trying to keep track. I'm supposed to do KRBD tomorrow. So, all right, that brings us down. That passes 6-1. That brings us down to 785. Ordinance 13-1723, exempting the purchase of cemetery maintenance and operation services from exempting the purchase of cemetery maintenance and operation services from competitive bidding and approving the agreement for Bayview Cemetery maintenance and operations for 2013 to 2015. Do we have a motion? First reading.
Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Go ahead, Bob.
I move the City Council approve in first reading ordinance number 13-1723, exempting the purchase of cemetery maintenance and operation services from competitive bidding and approving the agreement for Bayview Cemetery maintenance and operations for 2013-2015 between Robert S. Schultz, DBA PM Landscaping, and the City of Ketchikan, and establish an effective date.
Moved and seconded. Bob, do you have anything?
Yeah, I looked through the contract here and tried to figure out our deliverables and stuff, and I guess if we're approving this, we must be fairly satisfied with the care and maintenance that we're getting out there. I guess what I would ask, are there any major capital projects that we're going to have him working on during this time period?
Mr. Mayor, to respond to Councilmember Severson's first question, yes, we are very satisfied in landscaping, and that's why the ordinance is essentially before you as capital improvements.
Morganberry Public Works Contracts and Grants Administrator. I believe the budgeted capital improvement projects for 2014 and out consist of paving the parking area adjacent to Section 9. And actually for this year, I believe installing fencing along the rock face. And well, that doesn't fall under the capital improvement project level, but it's drainage maintenance, which is extensive. It requires a lot of work.
Bob, did you hear that?
Your Honor, I can hear everybody else very well. It seems like Carl's mic is cutting in and out. It was fairly broken, but I think I got the drift of it.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? I answered my own questions, so call the roll.
Coos,
Yes.
Bergeron,
Aye.
West,
Yes.
Harris,
Aye.
Severson,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Okay, that passes 7-0. That brings us down to 7A6, contract 1311, Waterfront Promenade Master Planning, Historic Ketchikan, Inc. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor, I move the City Council approve contract number 13-11, Waterfront Promenade Master Planning between the City of Ketchikan and Historic Ketchikan, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $20,000. Authorize funding from the Port Department's 2013 Waterfront Promenade Master Plan capital account and direct the City Manager to execute the contract on behalf of the City Council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Sam, do you want to add anything?
It's a fine thing to do. We should do it.
Anybody else? Call the roll.
Carlson,
Yes.
Harris,
Aye.
Olson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Bergeron,
Aye.
Severson,
Yes.
Coos.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Now brings us down to 7B, KPU for Ketchikan Public Utility B1 memorandum of understanding between the City of Ketchikan and Petersburg, Alaska regarding analysis of the future individual sales of Southeast Alaska Power Agency hydro projects. Sam.
Your Honor, I move the City Council direct the mayor and staff to take such action with respect to the memorandum of understanding between the cities of Ketchikan, Petersburg, Wrangell, Alaska regarding the analysis of the future sales of the individual projects to the member communities and the future disposition of Southeast Alaska Power Agency as determined appropriate by the City Councils.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Sam, did you want to say anything?
Well, I'm fully in support of this. That's what I'd like to start there. I think that those that are for the status quo and those who would like to see some change, I think that an independent study will solidify each position. And I think that there should be no reason to not do this. I think it fulfills a 2009 MOU that was begun with Petersburg, Wrangell, and Ketchikan, and then this is just the completion of that. And I think that we should go forward and do it. Personally, my suspicion is that I think that they're going to find some room for change within our organization, but we'll see. And I certainly appreciate and respect and want to follow the manager's recommendation in this agenda item, which calls for a completely and separate and independent review by folks who have no financial, fiscal ties to anybody and get a completely unbiased opinion here. So I would ask my fellow council members to support this agenda item as presented and vote it up tonight and not delay it. Thank you.
Dick?
Yeah, Your Honor, I think this item needs to be discussed thoroughly. I also think it needs to be, the whole council needs to understand how SEPA operates and more information about them. So with that, I'm going to move to defer this item until the first meeting in July.
Second. Move to defer the first meeting in July. We got to vote on the deferment before I can talk. Go ahead.
Bergeron?
No.
Severson?
Yes.
Olson?
No.
Carlson?
No.
Coos?
Yes.
Harris?
No.
West?
Yes.
Okay, that fails 4-3.
Your Honor?
Go ahead.
I appreciate what we're talking about here. I think the Joint Action Agency agreement was signatory between the three communities, and it didn't involve SEPA, so I don't disagree with Carl's recommendations in that. But there's a lot of reasons to defer at this particular point. For one thing, there's a meeting, the end of April, SEPA meeting here in Ketchikan, where we invited all the mayors to speak or visit us and see what's going on and have a chance to talk about things such as this. Wrangell is the only community at this point that has made this move. Petersburg has taken no action on it, from what I understand. And at our last SEPA meeting, there wasn't any mention that they didn't have the interest. And then with Carl's recommendation, it didn't really give me any information. I would just soon have a white paper on this to understand what the benefit is of us moving ahead with such a study like this. And again, this isn't a staff issue. This is a community issue. And I want to make sure that it's to the best benefit of the community and to the region. When we talk about power and hydro, thermal, wind, whatever it is, on a regional aspect, dealing with the state of Alaska and AEA, they have the intention to, they would rather work with a regional entity, somebody that's representing multiple communities rather than an individual. And then the funding, now you can see what's happening with the funding. An individual community is going to have a hard time and be pressed to come about with a project. This is a very, very important aspect for our community, and I just don't want to jump into something without more information, and that's why I voted for the deferral. We have a lot more reasons to defer it than we do to approve it at this time, and it's not running on a time schedule that is an emergency. This doesn't have to be done or enacted until the end of next year, from what I understand. So there's not a timetable. There's a lot of information that we can gain, and I think we need to fully understand the ramifications here, because there are things other than just owning the project. There's economic dispatch of the facilities between Tyee and Ketchikan. If we did move to own them ourselves, the power sales agreement would go away, so the Wrangell could decide how much they're going to charge Ketchikan for Tyee power, and we wouldn't have a particular voice in that. We'd have to sign a power sales agreement with them, and it could be more than the 6.8 cents. And if times turn harder and they want to up that rate, we may not have control over that. At least when we're in SEPA, we have a vote on the board. Again, I think that after we discuss this some more, I would also make a move to look at a deferral based on the information. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Sam?
Thank you. All of those issues that Mr. Severson just brought up would be brought forth in a study. I mean, he's talking about the pros and cons of us owning these projects individually and SEPA as an entity as it stands now. And so, you know, we're sitting here and if we're going to turn this into an argument about the continuation of SEPA, it is not appropriate. The issue on the table going forward is whether we want to engage ourselves in an independent study that would come up with positions that would back Mr. Severson or others. And so I want everybody not to be confused by it, the discussion at the table. The issue we're talking about here is entering into a study, not about what the outcome of that study is going to be. And I think as policymakers and people going forward with the economic engine of our region is power. And we're running out of power. And I think that we need to know what the best entity is going forward and how we're going to get there. Is it with SEPA or is it on our own? And I think a study is going to help us find that out. So I would encourage the council not to be confused by this. I think I would encourage you to go forward with this study, to join Wrangell, and I'm pretty sure that Petersburg would join in as well. Thank you.
Anybody else? Marty?
Yeah, I'm not confused. However, we don't know what this study would cost, and I think that there's a whole lot of unknowns and unintended consequences that might come about for this. And I don't think I'd be prepared to vote on this at this point. There's just too much unknown, like the cost, among other things.
Go ahead, Dick.
Yeah, I apologize to Sam, but I think this is a direct attempt to break up SEPA. That's been the whole intent of Wrangell. I apologize to Carl, but he says he doesn't like being under the thumb of SEPA, and I don't believe he ever has been. SEPA has worked very hard with these communities to keep that power rate low. And I know there's some differences of opinion on how to operate SEPA, simply because we can't seem to move employees back and forth, and there's operational issues, but it's not the issue of providing good power to this community. I don't know how, if we start messing with this right now, and we all have heard about raising Swan Lake, SEPA can take on that responsibility. We are the ones that benefit from that power. And I don't think this council is going to want to take on a $6 million bond on top of what we got to raise Swan Lake when it's the best and most reasonable source of power. Somebody's working for us, and it's SEPA. And you might look at me as being prejudiced because I've sat on that board for off and on for probably 4 years now, and I've never seen anybody not looking out for the benefit of the community. And I would, until this whole council understands how SEPA operates and gets a feeling for it, I don't think we should be attacking it. And it is an attack. It is an attack, Sam. I would encourage us just to simply vote this down and bring it back then. To try to defer, it wouldn't defer unless somebody wants to reconsider the deferral. But we need to just vote this down and have a good workshop on and with SEPA.
Mr. Mayor.
I understand your point, Dick, and I understand Sam's point. You know, SEPA has been a good working operation. I mean, they're inviting the mayors and managers to the meeting in April, and I have my own concerns with SEPA, on revenues and operations and how it's going in there. So there is problems between the communities or the entities that are running Tyee and Swan Lake right now and SEPA, and it's out there, and it's going to have to be dealt with. Wrangell is pushing for this. Sam is on board with it, and it might come up with some great ideas. I don't know who's going to pay for it and how that's going to be. I did call Petersburg this week and talk to the person that would know, the city clerk, and they took no action on this item. And so that's where Petersburg is on it. I have no problem moving ahead with this and looking at what comes out of it. I just don't know how we're going to get it set up and work, but I imagine management would do that. But there are conflicts between how our utility, Thomas Bay, and SEPA, and we're all going to have to work together and work it out. And right now, it needs to get done. But like you said, Dick, getting these out on the table, working together, understanding how it all works, is going to help everybody. Right now, when the Fort Dam pool was going, when I first got on here, and then into SEPA, there wasn't much interest in SEPA and power and all of a sudden. Then all of a sudden the oil went up and everybody's switching to electric, and power is an important issue now. Now more people are interested in SEPA than ever before. And before it just went along like nothing, it was never there. So, but there are issues that we got to deal with. I'm glad we're all going to the meeting on the 25th, and we can all express ourselves. Sam, Dick, and then Matt.
Mr. Mayor, and with respect to Mr. Coos, my position about wanting to go forward with the study is definitely not an attack on anything. I mean, we're set up here to do what we're supposed to be looking after the best interests of the people that we represent. There are certainly questions out there about the modality of SEPA, about how SEPA is structured, certainly the power sales agreement, certainly the I think Bob wrote a letter about, if Grandpa was, had this and he had no liabilities and all of that. And I read that, and I got to thinking about liabilities. Well, what happens if KPU owns that and there's a catastrophic problem? I mean, KPU would deal with it just as SEPA would deal with it. The thing that is most alluring to me about not having this power sales agreement is the ability to open up the electrical markets. We could go to Mr. Custer and to his group, and we could go to the mines, and we could build that project, and we would not need funding. We're always sitting on our hands waiting for somebody to fund us. We could do that project on our own. And if you talk about raising Swan Lake, that is such a small amount of money, considering the money that we've put into SEPA and into that organization in the past 3 years. We could fund it within our existing rates. We could do that project. And we could rationalize the cost of those projects in diesel savings. And, I hear from the management of SEPA that burning a little diesel is not a bad thing. Well, this year we burned a lot of diesel. We're burning diesels full time. And so I'm sitting here as a policymaker, as somebody who is tasked with bringing forward, building an economy, putting in place the things that people that need to build an economy. They need cheap power, they need abundant power. We're out of that. I think that SEPA has done a really good job with keeping our rates low. I have concerns going forward about building additional hydro infrastructure. I think it's a real roadblock. And I think that we would be better off if we had these facilities ourselves and did it ourselves. And I think that we have an obligation to find out from an independent consultant whether Mr. Coos and Mr. Sievertson's concept of SEPA going forward is the way to go or something else. So this study is about an independent view about what we should do going forward. And it's such a huge question that we need to invest the money, whatever that might be. I mean, up to a certain point, but we need to do it. And I think the management's behind it. I'm certainly behind it. And I know others are as well. So that's all I got.
Dick?
Yeah, I still think that we're premature on jumping into this study. Once again, the council, and I've talked to a couple of them, they really don't understand how SEPA works. And I agree with Lou, there are issues, but hey, we've got issues around this table and with management. We work through those things, and SEPA has always worked through them. And that's why I think over the years, the rates have continued to be low. We've got our kickbacks from SEPA. And like I say, all I'm saying is I'm not saying don't do the study. I'm saying let's give this a couple of months and have a work session on this thing, and then sit down and we can make a better decision on how it is, because we're getting a lot of pressure. We got a pressure from an ex-legislator, which didn't quite. The facts don't back up what he said. I have to believe that some of the facts that Mr. Custer said doesn't back up what he said, but he's got something to gain if we can bomb SEPA out, then the door's wide open. Except they've got to figure out how to get the money to build it, which they haven't been able to do yet. So I think we're edging on a thin line here. Then we just need to wait a couple of months, have a work session, and then we can make an intelligent decision on how to deal with this.
Matt?
One of the things that really frustrated me when we came time to renew the lease for the hospital was that we were at the end of a timeline already. We're at the beginning of a timeline now, and I would much rather we begin a study now, which is probably going to take us 4 months before it even launches, after we get everyone on board. By the time it gets done, it's going to put us into 2014, and then we're going to be in the middle of our discussions at that point. I don't want to be sitting here in November of 2014 saying, oh yeah, we have this study that we're contractually supposed to do. So more information for me is better. This is the logical next step, and we'll see where it comes, and we'll sit down with all the parties and work through it. But we have to have a starting point, and I think this is the best step.
Anybody else want to add anything? Go ahead, Bob.
How do you suspect that the committee will be formed?
I'm not sure. We're gonna, if this gets passed, I think we'll have to talk with Wrangell. I don't know if Petersburg, if they took no action on it, so I don't know if they even want to be a part of it. So if they don't, it's between Wrangell and Ketchikan if it passes.
Well, you know, I see in the memo here that Carl had proposed to put 2 utility guys on there and stuff like that. And I know there's friction between the utilities and SEPA, but I think this has to be as impartial as it can, yet have to have knowledgeable people doing it. So I think the makeup of the committee is really important. And on Sam's issue, you know, SEPA wants more power into the system too. But when you're selling power into Ketchikan, then you also have to deal with KPU. I don't think KPU is going to sell or buy somebody else's power ahead of using their own. They'll be in the same boat, whereas when KPU needs it, such as when we're running diesel, then we'll buy it from them. And that's no different than what we have right now with SEPA under the power sales agreement. We'll utilize the best resources first, and then after that we'll utilize whatever we have. So don't, under the assumption that we're going to buy power from somebody else all through this process isn't necessarily true. I agree, we need to have a study. I'm not against that. I just want to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons, and that when we move forward this, we do it and let the facts and figures speak for themselves. Thank you.
All right, let's call the roll and see where we're at.
Harris?
Aye.
Coos?
No.
Severson?
No.
West?
No.
Carlson?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 4-3.
Your Honor, you've already said I was going to change my vote. So yes.
Say again then?
I was going to ask you to change my vote to yes.
You've already announced the call.
But you already announced the call, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gotta be
I don't, no problem. Well, let's move on. It's 4-3. It brings us down to vouchers, item B, or
No,
A8.
we gotta do 7B2.
Oh, shoot, yeah. 7B2.
Yeah, let's not forget that one.
Ordinance 13-1721, authorizing the issuance of municipal utility revenue bonds not to exceed $15 million, construction of Woodman Lake project, authorizing the pledge of Ketchikan public utility revenues to paid debt services, authorizing the sale of the bonds to Alaska Municipal Bond Bank. First reading.
Your Honor, I move the City Council approve in the first reading ordinance number 13-1721, authorizing the issuance of municipal utility revenue bonds of the city in the principal amount not to exceed $15 million to finance certain costs of constructing and equipping the Whitman Lake project as authorized by Resolution 11-2411 and ratified by the voters at an election held therein on October 4th, 2011. Authorizing the pledge of Ketchikan public utility revenues to pay the debt service on the bond, provided for date, terms, and covenants of the bond, and authorizing the sale of the bond to the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank on the terms and conditions provided in this ordinance and establishing an effective date.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Sam, do you want to add anything?
I don't. the motion said or not?
Your Honor?
Yes, Bob?
You know, when we went into this Whitman project, one of the things that we discussed at some length was of whether or not we were going to have a true-up agreement when this thing comes online. I know that there's a potential of you know, if this study goes through and we decide to do something different, but I don't think that's going to be timely enough for this Whitman thing. So I'd kind of like to know where we are on the true-up agreement.
Carl?
Councilmember Severson, SEPA has forwarded us a draft methodology for our review. I reviewed it. It's been reviewed by Electric Division staff. I'm waiting to hear comments back from the finance director. As soon as I have those, it's my intent to call the SEPA CEO and sit down with him and have a discussion of that methodology.
Great, thank you.
Okay, call the roll, please.
West?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Harris?
Aye.
Severson?
Yeah.
Coos?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 7-0. And that brings us down to 8 vouchers for the Daily News, $15.33.75. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor, I move for approval of vouchers for the Ketchikan Daily News in the amount of $1,533.75.
Do we have a second? Call the roll.
Severson?
Yeah.
Bergeron?
Aye.
Coos?
Yes.
Harris?
Aye.
Olson?
Yes.
West? Yes. Carlson?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. It brings us to manager's report. Carl, do you have anything to add?
Just a couple, Mr. Mayor. I did want to note tonight, again, of the pending retirement of Michael Knabb from the position of museum director. Michael has done some very great work for us over the years, and I'm only sorry we never got to the point where we could move a museum project forward. And we're going to start the recruitment for that position shortly. If you haven't been up to the library lately, a new piece is in over the entrance, A Trip to the Library. You have a photograph of it in your packet. It's quite the piece. I think it's a great addition. I laid a memo on the table tonight relative to the capital budget. I won't go into the details. I will say I think, given the fact that we did not have anybody on Senate Finance or in Senate leadership this year, we did very well within the Senate's version of the budget. I'm hoping we may be able to do a little better when it goes over to the House, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that will happen and that it will not be subject to the governor's veto. Last thing I have, Clear Result has been working steadily on the energy issue. They're asking for a session with the City Council. They've thrown out the dates of May 22nd or May 23rd. They want to discuss the audits, the benchmarks, and rate design. So I don't know if that date.
What are the date? What's the day of the weeks on that?
Wednesday and Thursday.
What day is that again?
May 22nd and May 23rd.
And then,
Clerks will be gone.
yay.
We're
No, you'll be
both gone. We're both gone that week.
That means we don't have anybody to clerk the meeting.
That's right.
So we'll have to ask them for a different day.
We'll have to come back. We'll do that.
Thank you.
We can't do without one of those.
All right, anything else?
No, that's all I had.
Anybody have any questions on any items? All right, that brings us down to clerk's file,
Nothing, Your Honor.
city attorney's file. And then, any future agenda items? All right, mayor and council comments. Let's start with Dick.
Yeah, just to comment on that, reviewing the SEPA, I guess, agreement and so forth, I'm assuming you're going to come back with how the committees are going to be, the committee will be established for who we're going to hire to do it, because I do not believe that anybody from the administration should be on the committee. It's got to be an independent committee completely. Otherwise, we've got the same bias going into it as we have right now. They can be consultants, provide all the information in the world, but don't want them on the committee.
Sam?
I think that the study is going to be an interesting work session. I'm sure that we're going to sit down and talk about all the ground rules. I certainly appreciate Mr. Coos's concerns about bias within the study itself. I think we should, as a council, safeguard against that and do our best to make sure that that doesn't happen. I'm very pleased that we decided to go forward with this study. I think that, I don't know what the work product of it is going to be. I hope it's an affirmation of what we have, and if it is, it will all give us reason to go forward together as status quo. But I think it's going to be a really important tool. I'm looking forward to what the outcomes of that are going to be. And that's all I got.
Deanne?
I want to thank all the various people that came up to speak during public comment. I find it very, very useful to get information from a variety of different entities, and the only way we can do that is by people coming up to the podium and providing their insight. I want to thank the business community members that came forward as well as the individuals. I think that their insight and comments are very useful for us in making various decisions.
Matt?
Thank you for not posting the stop sign at Pine Bog.
Yeah. It's the best thing we did today.
Thanks for that.
Marty?
I want to thank the lobbying committee and Carl for their hard work, and congratulations on what looks to be a real good year for us legislatively.
KJ? I also say the same thing. Good work on the cap. I just, it's one cap. Well, you have to look at the House and then the governor, but at least we got it there so far, so I hope it continues. Keep up the good work, everybody. Anything else? Oh, sorry, Bob.
Aloha.
Go ahead.
I have nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Our executive session got canceled. Yeah. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
We are. Thank you, everybody.